Yeah, he knows this. Okay, thank you all for coming. I know it's a busy time of the semester. Today, our talk is by Emily Allen, who did her PhD here in Andrew Oxenham's lab and now is doing a dual postdoc with part-time in Andrew's lab, part-time in Kendrick's lab. And today she's going to be talking about her project with Kendrick K and a lot of other people. So
yeah. All right, thank you, Anu. Before I begin, I want to preface this talk by saying this is very much an ongoing project, and there may or may not be people that you know that are participating in it. And there are certain aspects of the experiment that we're intentionally keeping participants in the dark about until all of the data is collected. So there are certain things I'm not going to be able to talk about. I'll be intentionally vague about the stimuli and certain aspects of the experimental design, so I apologize. We promise to reveal everything once all of the data is collected. For those of you in the room that do know some sensitive details, zip it for until the end of November, at least. All right, so the general motivation for this project was to create a large, high-quality data set that helps us get a better understanding of how visual information is encoded in the brain when there is long-term exposure to stimuli, specifically looking at natural scenes. And the data set is aiming to be broad-reaching so that the analysis possibilities can be flexible and diverse. And since there aren't any data sets of this scale or this scope that I'm aware of currently, ultra-high field data set with high resolution at whole brain across many, many sessions, we do believe that it will have some appeal in the scientific community, a lot of appeal. I'm supposed to talk things up. No data set currently available has gone to this extent. No group of participants has been scanned this many times. And for this reason, the data set is enticing in the context of machine learning, as machine learning generally requires a lot of data. As far as who's working on this project, here are the people that we're referring to as the core contributors, those who got the grant and came up with the idea, and are collecting the data every day and are processing the data as it comes in. The ones basically knee-deep in the trenches, putting their blood, sweat, and tears into this project. As you'll see, it's a very big project with a lot of moving parts, and thanks to everyone's teamwork and everyone contributing their unique skills, each of us staying on top of things, it's actually been a really cool experience so far. I wouldn't say easy, but definitely very cool. But check in with us again at the end of the year. We might all need an extended vacation. For now, it's been great. And we do have other collaborators as well, and I'll go over that in a bit more detail later. So this project was inspired by a study and a data set that came out in 2008 called the Visual Imaging, or the VIM-1 data set. And it was another large-scale, bold fMRI data set. The first one, in fact, I think, to be made publicly available. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kendrick. So the study had 2 subjects, and each one of them was scanned 5 times. And this was at the 4 Tesla scanner, around 2 millimeter voxel resolution, and just looking at the occipital lobe, and their stimuli were grayscale natural images. And it did end up generating a lot of interest for researchers, both of human and also of computer vision. So following that 2008 paper, various projects have cropped up applying similar methods and exploring, for example, semantic information in the brain, processing of natural sounds, exploring the ventral stream using convolutional neural networks, exploring hierarchical models of higher visual areas, looking at how individuals represent images in their higher visual areas, specifically looking at familiar images, visual categorization. even work that I've done prior to knowing Kendrick was influenced by that paper and their methods. So I wouldn't say mine is particularly influential yet, but maybe eventually. So coming back to our study, this is a long-term project that we're doing at the passively shielded 7 Tesla at the CMRR, oldest 7T in the world. And the data collection is lasting roughly a year. We started the screening process last October, and we started officially collecting the data for the main part of the experiment in January, and we'll be scanning throughout pretty much the rest of the year. So we have 8 participants. Each of them will be scanned roughly 42 times, and this is a long-term continuous recognition task, or a memory task. And the stimuli that they're being exposed to are thousands of natural images, and they have a task. For every image they see, they need to indicate if it is a new image, and they're responding via a button box. So an image they've never seen before in this experiment, or old, they've seen it before either today or in any prior session. So as you can imagine, if you're trying to remember things throughout the course of a year, this could get to be a challenging task. General information about the stimulus presentation. So all images are restricted to a square that's 8.4 by 8.4 degrees visual angle. And it's presented via this high-quality LCD display by Cambridge Research Systems, known as the bold screen. And each stimulus is on for 3 seconds, followed by a blank screen for 1 second. So you can try it for yourself. So if you have a table in front of you, you can tap on it. Use your index finger to indicate if the image is new to you in this experiment. It's the first time you're seeing it here. Use your middle finger if it is an old image, it's a repeat, and you've seen it before. Importantly, that red dot, you need to fixate on it the entire time. Fair warning, these are not the actual images used from the study because, as I said, the participants walk amongst us and we don't want to infect them in any way. So just imagine that these are glorious natural scenes that you're looking at. I don't hear much tapping. Silent tap. That was middle fingers, I could tell. All right, so you get the general idea, Powerpuff Girls. So it's basically what they're doing for 40 sessions. So what kind of data are we collecting? Quite a variety, actually. So we have the functional data, so the whole brain EPI data during their task, which is at 1.8 millimeter resolution. We will be collecting some resting state data as well for those interested in resting state. We have collected retinotopy and a category localizer. As far as the anatomical data goes, we have 6 T1s, 3 T2s, 4 diffusion tensor images. So that's looking at the tractography or the connections in the brain, the large-scale connections. And we have an angiogram and a venogram. We have field maps for distortion correction. Of course, the behavioral data, so how the subjects are performing on the actual task. And we will be getting some physiological data as well, including pulse and respiration. And we also collect a lot of detailed information for each session. So the day that they were scanned, the time of the scan, the duration of the scan. We get a lot of feedback from the subjects. What's your mood today? What's your stress level? Have you had caffeine in the last 3 hours? Were you comfortable in the scanner? We get a lot of information from them. We also record just general notes, the equipment that we used, the sequences that we used, if we had any hardware issues that day. And we also take a screenshot of the slice placement of the slice placed over the brain for each session as well. So if we want to compare to similar data sets that are out in the wild, so obviously this is the one that I was alluding to before, the VIM1 data set, which was at the 4 Tesla scanner. There's also a newer study out referred to as the BOLD 5000 data set that's on arXiv as of 2018. And then there's the current study. So we can look at field strength. I'm basically just going to brag for a second. So field strength were at 7T, whereas they were at 3T and 4T. Spatial resolution, a little bit better. Whether or not that's a huge deal or not, I guess is debatable. TR, I don't know if it's necessarily good or bad, but we're at 1.6 seconds, so that's the repetition time. Spatial coverage, the original VIM1 dataset was at just the occipital lobe, and the BOLD 5000's at 3T, but it is whole brain. And then ours is also whole brain. And as far as the number of subjects, the first one had 2 subjects, which were actually the authors, one of them right back there. There were 4 subjects for this one, and I think one of them, they didn't collect all of the data. There was attrition problems. The current study, we have 8 subjects. So as far as the number of functional sessions that we're collecting, they had 5. And the BOLD 5000, they had 15 for 3 of them, 9 for one of them, who just didn't want to continue. And ours were doing around 40. Type of stimuli is similar, so we're also going with these natural scenes. As far as the number of images, this is where I have to get vague. So they had around 2,000, they had around 5,000. We have many thousands, and I'm not going to say an exact number. And as far as the number of repetitions of images, I will also be vague, but I'll just say several. Interstimulus interval, it's a pretty aggressive rapid design. And for the task, the first one was passive. This one, they're doing a valence rating. Basically, how much do you like the image? Do you like it, dislike it, or are you neutral? Which I feel would get boring pretty quickly. And ours is new old, which is super interesting and awesome. So better resolution, ultra high field, more subjects, more sessions. So our data set is holding up pretty well compared to what else is out there. Okay.
Can you go back
Sure.
about the time? The demonstration you gave to us was at a regular pace of every 3 seconds
Yep.
or so without fixation phase and so on. Is that also the case in the actual study? Because when the stimulus presentation is so quick, how are you going to decompose the responses to adjacent images?
So I'm not entirely following.
So how do you evaluate the baseline and in order to extract given the hemodynamic response?
Oh, yeah, so there are blank periods as
So
well.
there are.
Yeah, so it didn't show that in the demo, but there are blank periods where it's just a gray screen, just fixation, that we have several of those throughout each of the runs to establish a baseline estimate.
Okay, so that's randomly interspersed, or is through some sort of optimize the sequence of where you put the blank?
It's every, how many trials?
It's not quite random.
Not quite random.
But it's
Quasi-random,
optimized?
but with some periodicity.
Okay.
And they're a small fraction of the trials
Yeah.
is to push more and more stimulus trials in.
Yeah. So here's how big the slice is. The yellow box indicates which parts of the brain we're imaging during the functional scans. So you can see we're getting a whole brain, including cerebellum, for anyone who cares about the cerebellum. So this is actually somewhat unique at the ultra-high field. A lot of people who do studies at the 7T, they're focusing more on getting sub-millimeter resolution, looking at layers, and that's at a cost, so you can't image the whole brain when you do that. So it's a spatial sacrifice, so you don't necessarily get whole brain. So it's a trade-off of resolution versus coverage that we're looking at. So 1.8 millimeters felt like a reasonable voxel resolution in order to get the whole brain data on all of our subjects. Yeah.
Maybe you'll talk about it. The original connectome 70 data they collected was 1.6 millimeter with multiband 5.
Yeah.
Did you guys decide not to do high multiband for some particular
We're doing multiband 3, which is reasonable.
I know the pre-scan time is really long.
Oh, the reference scan,
The
it's
single band
like 30 seconds or something.
reference.
Yeah.
Multiband 5 is like 90.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's a lot.
I asked because that's what they're doing. So.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I understand, for the ACP protocol, they were prioritizing fairly fast TR. Their TR was 1
Yeah,
second. The stated purpose was for like, especially for resting state type data, where you're trying to get sampling of physiological artifacts and all that stuff. That wasn't the priority here. So I don't want to push multiband that fast. I'm happy with a slower TR, and you'll gain some raw image SNR if you TR is longer. So some considerations pushed us to do less aggressive multiband and longer TRs.
Thank you. So each run, when you consider the reference scan in the beginning, it's almost 6 minutes long. There's 12 runs per session, and they're interspersed with field maps for distortion correction. So here's a couple of videos just to look at cool brain data. So this is 6 T1s averaged together, and we're just going to kind of go through the slices. So we get some, and sorry about the jumpiness there, I think it's my computer, getting pretty good gray-white contrast and nice-looking clean data there. So the subjects were very still during those 6 runs that we averaged together. And then this is an angiogram, so looking at the arteries in the vein. And if for no other reason, it's a 5-minute scan and you get the coolest looking data. So just, you can show this to your family and friends, even if you don't have an actual purpose for it. Super cool. I love looking at those. So this is looking at the T1 aligned with the T2 aligned with the EPI data. So here's the T1, here's the T2, here's the EPI data. So everything's lining up really well. It looks good. These are kind of good sanity checks to look at. And this is for one subject. We're looking at axial, coronal, sagittal, and another subject, axial, coronal, sagittal. And then these are all 8 subjects. So we're getting good data for both functional and anatomical from all of our subjects, which is cool. So this is a leaderboard that our participants get to check out after their sessions to see how well they're doing on a variety of metrics. And each subject is a different color. And we don't tell them who the other subjects are or what colors they are. All they know is their own color, and so they can look at their performance relative to their other sessions and also compare themselves to the other subjects in a sort of de-identified way. And so this could potentially be discouraging for subjects to look at this, but we've actually found the opposite, where the subjects seem very motivated when they look at these metrics to be like, oh, I was moving around a bit this session, I should fix that, or I should stop sneezing during the scan. So I'll go over each one of these just so you can see what I'm talking about. So this first one is looking at BOLD response, the blood oxygenation level. So the y-axis values aren't super important here. Broadly, these are the percentage of voxels that pass a certain threshold, basically looking at how much visually evoked variance there is in the data. The important thing just to know is that higher is better. Obviously, there's only so much participants can do to increase their BOLD response. Your physiology is obviously a limiting factor there, but our subjects do drink their fair share of caffeine, which has been known to help. So they are trying to improve in whatever way they can. And I think also if you're more still, that gives you better SNR, which also results in a better BOLD response. So these things are all kind of interconnected.
So can you say what the y-axis is again?
Yeah, so it's a percentage of voxels that pass a certain threshold that Kendrick has chosen. I'm not sure exactly what you ended up choosing as the cutoff.
There's a time series model that just quantifies how much of the variance in each voxel time series is due to a stimulus being present. So it's like a binary type model. values, and I just decide beyond some value how many voxels are actually passing that.
Are you surprised that the number is so low?
Oh yeah, so this is over the whole volume, which includes non-brain voxels and everything. So it's just a quick and dirty. We just wanted some metric to track over the course of the
So it's
session.
not, because if you just think about the cortical regions, even if just the visual cortex reacts to
Yeah,
it,
you can get
far more than
yeah, several percent
Yeah,
for
so
sure.
if you were to restrict this to visual cortical voxels, certainly the y-axis would be much, much higher.
Yeah. So this includes, as you said, not even the brain value.
Yeah.
It's just the whole thing that's
The
in there.
entire
in your
image
account.
slab.
Yeah, so it's just kind of a relative assessment. So as long as we're keeping the metric consistent across each of the sessions, we can see how much better or worse each subject is relative to their previous session. But yeah, obviously that's why I didn't want to say too much about these values, because they're not exactly as important as looking at visual cortex voxels, for example. So this is response rate. Basically, we're establishing that they're awake and they're responding on each trial. As you can see with the y-axis, this is going from 97% to 100%. So their performance as far as responding goes on every trial is really good. Most subjects are hovering around 100% response rate on every run, on every session. So we're really happy with how they're doing. If nothing else, we're pretty sure they are not asleep while they are in the scanner, or they're really good at pressing buttons while also being asleep. But no, we're pretty confident that they are wide awake and motivated and want to do well on this. This is what we call loosely a performance metric, and again, I'm not going to say exactly what this is for the sake of, non-disclosure. We don't tell subjects exactly what it is, but basically it's an assessment of how well they're doing on the memory task. So the subjects are very determined to do well. There's no doubt it's a challenging task, but they've been working really hard on it and doing pretty well on it too. We have some subjects I'm just shocked at how well they do every time. They're really amazing. I don't think I would do this well on the task. And this one shows their overall motion across each session. So basically assessing how much their head gets displaced from the beginning of a scan session to the end. And the y-axis is in millimeters. So you can see that generally they're quite good. Obviously the first session was a bit more of a struggle, but I'll actually talk a little bit about that in a moment. But yeah, they're doing really well as far as staying relatively in the same place throughout the entire session. And another motion metric we look at is something called motion jitter. So this is looking at how much they're moving within a given run, so how much they're wiggling around or if they sneeze or something. I think this subject definitely sneezed a few times here. But generally, they're all doing really well on this metric as well. So this brings me to a bit of a divergence. So CaseForge. We dabbled with the idea of whether or not we should use head cases to keep our subjects' heads in place while they're being scanned. For the record, I was staunchly against this from the beginning. It's basically this very rigid material made out of styrofoam, and I didn't think it would be comfortable. I thought this would be upsetting to the subjects. I thought that they would, it's basically like this enclosure around their whole head. I thought they're going to get claustrophobia. They're going to hate all of this. It's going to be, everyone's going to drop out immediately. But I was proven wrong. So this is a 32-channel head coil. This is where a subject's head normally goes. So without a head case, you would put this foam padding down to keep it more comfortable, because obviously this would be super uncomfortable by itself. And you add some padding around the sides to keep their head still. But with the addition of this head case, it molds perfectly to their head. So basically, you get this iPod from Berkeley, yes, an iPod, and you have a video camera, and the subjects will be sitting in a chair, they'll be wearing a swimming cap, and you basically walk around them, and there's this cube that's kind of hovering around their head, so you're making this video as you're walking around them, doing a 360 a couple of times, and then you upload that video and you send it to UC Berkeley, and then they take that information, they know the type of head coil you're using, they know the dimensions of the subject's head, and they can 3D print these head cases and ship them back to us in like a couple of days. It was a super quick turnaround. And so they're customized for each participant. So that was super cool. So this is the back of the head case. And here's Kendrick modeling how happy he is to be using the head case. He loves it. So this is basically what we use. And this top part comes down, and also this part comes down, and then we can get good images of the brain. So there is also a top part to the head case that looks like that, so you turn into a luchador. It's super constricting. It's very tight in the head coil. There's not a lot of breathability, so your head can kind of warm up when you've got all of that going on, in addition to the head coil being brought down. So I was not a fan of this. Kendrick laid in the scanner not being scanned for like 15 minutes, and already you were feeling kind of hot and uncomfortable. So you also agreed that maybe the top part isn't totally necessary and could cause people to get kind of claustrophobic. So no to that, but generally, yes to head cases. They have been really cool. So if I go back to that overall motion, if you look at the first sessions, and I can't prove for sure that this is true, but during the first session, subjects had a lot more motion overall going from the beginning to the end of the session than they did after they got the head cases, which was after their first session. So yeah, good stuff. Okay, so, and head motion has been, oh yes.
Sorry, what did it cost?
Was it 150 per head case? And we already have the camera at the CMRR with the iPod, so you don't have to worry about buying that again. I think
that was
that's,
a one-time 2K cost.
yeah.
It's now bought.
And if you're interested, I can show you how to use it, because it's kind of a glitchy thing, but once it works great. So this is looking at head motion. So this is raw data coming off the scanner for 1 5-minute run. And you can see that the motion is pretty good. So that is a movie going across 5 minutes. And you can see there's barely any movement. So we've been getting really good data like that. If a subject sneezed, for example, you would see like kind of like that. But for the most part, subjects are very still, which has been cool.
If you use the wrong head case,
People will notice. I have put the wrong one in by accident for one of the subjects, and they're like, I don't think this is my head. I'm like, oh, you're right. So they can tell a difference.
Is that better or worse than not having it at all?
Well, I guess it depends on how different people's heads are. Obviously, head shapes can vary quite a bit. So if you find people with similar enough heads, it might still be fine. So just screen all of your subjects, be like, turn around, let me see your head. Okay, you pass. And then as far as measurement stability goes, here is an average of 1 session of EPI data, and then each jump is another session, so this is 12 different sessions. So you can see that the data looks pretty stable across 12 sessions, so that's also good to see. We're not seeing a lot of variability there. So here's the last part of the leaderboard, and this shows the progress of each participant in terms of how many sessions they've completed. So again, each subject is a different color. That's the beginning of our data collection, and this over here is our end goal point. So we're over 100 scans now, and we're about 1/3 of the way through. And thankfully, our participants seem to still be having a good time. They seem to be enjoying it. No one is showing any signs of dropping out yet, so that's been really nice so far. So a shout out to our great participants. We love them dearly. And just a quick note about how we settled on the participants that we chose. So we cast a wide net across the university. We were sending out flyers. We posted on the CMRR volunteer listserv, which I think has around 3,000 people on it now. And we got around over 100 people that responded. Mihan's nodding. She's like, I got all those emails, yeah. And then we based on a bit of back and forth, like you told them a bit about the study, I talked to some people as well, and then we kind of ruled out, okay, is this person going to be around for the next year and a half? Is it convenient for them to get to the CMRR? Have they ever been scanned before? Are they claustrophobic? Does it seem like they would be motivated to actually try hard on this, or is it just for the money? So there's a number of things that we were looking into. So there were email exchanges, and we told them a lot about the study as well. There were also phone interviews based on the email exchanges. So that narrowed it down. We created this large database with all of these different parameters from the phone interviews. And then from that, we chose the top 15 people that we wanted to actually bring in for screening sessions. So that included measuring their acuity, making sure that they were not colorblind, and then also giving them an entire 2-hour scan session where they would actually be doing a task in the scanner so they could get a sense of what they would be in for the next year. And then we were looking at, how communicative are they with us? If we need to adjust the screen at all, are they going to tell us? Are they going to just not say anything? Are they going to give us feedback on general things? Are we going to know that they're okay in the scanner? Are they getting good bold response? Are they moving too much? All of those things. So based on those 15 people we screened, then we narrowed it down to 8 that we thought were the best ones. And we invited them to be part of the study. And thankfully, all 8 of them agreed to do it. And we've had a great time ever since. So long story short, without participants, none of this would be possible. Our participants are gold, and we love them.
Sorry, Emily, you didn't. This is all about their compliance. There's nothing else that you screen for example, gender, or other parameters?
No, we weren't really trying to get well-rounded as far as age or gender, anything like that. We just wanted to get people we knew that we would get good data from, and we knew that they would be available. Those were our top priorities for this. We weren't fooling ourselves that it wouldn't be like a fair sample of the population. These are kind of the best of the best for a number of things as far as being scanned and being good at doing tasks like these and things like that. Yeah. So, in case you want to try a project like this yourself, you might be asking, what do you need to pull off such a project? You need a lot of server space, for one, because this is a huge amount of data that we're getting on a daily basis. You also need a lot of money. The scanner costs are pretty high. Hourly payments for the subjects, as well as bonuses. We give them bonuses for, the number of sessions that they stay in and various things. You need amazing participants, obviously, that are actually willing to be scanned every week for about a year and are motivated to do well on the task. And 2 researchers available for each scan session, one of whom has to be an operator of the 7T. A huge stimulus set, a carefully crafted, solid experimental design. So there was a lot of thought that went into the design of the experiment. And then as far as acquisition protocol, you need to make sure that's streamlined and everything goes as smoothly as it can for each session. And then ongoing daily quality checks. So as the data is coming in, we're making sure that it's looking good, but also it quickly goes into pre-processing. Kendrick's fine-tuned a pre-processing pipeline, so he can basically grab the data and have it run overnight and have results in the morning. So we're keeping up with the data as it's coming in. And also people who are interested in analyzing the data. So there's no point in collecting this if no one actually wants to analyze it. So, as I mentioned, it's a lot of data. So we bought a server at the CMRR exclusively for this project. It has 56 terabytes of space, 256 gigabytes of RAM, currently already 22% full and rapidly increasing. And the server is called Surly. And our other server, which is also actively being used for analysis for this project as well as other projects in the lab, is Stone. So we have a not so subtle appreciation for craft beer in the lab. And also to give you a sense of the scale, so it's kind of hard to see on here, but this is 1,000 voxels from the visual cortex on the y-axis, 750 trials by 6 sessions, so that's 4,500 data points per voxel, so 4,500,000 data points right here, and that's only for 6 sessions and only for 10 or 1,000 voxels for one subject. So there's a lot more than 1,000 voxels in any human brain, and this is just one subject. So you can see how quickly this gets out of hand. And then here's just a nice close-up. Also, just really nice brain art. You know, if you want a new throw rug or scarf or something, this would be a good pattern to go with. So basically, with all of this data, there's a lot of different possibilities as far as how it can be analyzed, what you can do with the data. And we do have a lot of collaborators already that are in the process of working on this stuff. So we have us at the University of Minnesota. We're all, you know, obviously acquiring and analyzing already. And we've got Thomas Nazalaris, who obviously also co-wrote the grant, and his lab is working on different parts of analyses, image selection, image annotations, neural network models. Then we've got John Winor and his lab at NYU, and they're looking at modeling responses, topography of the early visual cortex, spatial frequency modeling. Keith Jameson, who used to be at the University of Minnesota, and now he's at Cornell Medical. He was a big part of developing the processing pipeline that we're using now, and he also has been important in consultation, so he's been involved in this project already a lot. Then we have Alex White and Jason Yateman. They're interested in visual word form area, population receptive fields, topography. Ariel Rokem is very interested and specializes in DTI data, so he's working on analyzing that. Ben Hutchinson is a memory researcher, so he's very interested and helped with the kind of the design of the memory component of the experiment and is also analyzing the data as it's coming in. Chris Racy, who was at University of Wisconsin, and now he's back, he's at Sussex in England, and he and his team are interested in doing color research, so they're analyzing the data related to color. And John Power is will be looking at the resting state data when it comes in. And did I skip anyone? I think that's everyone. And there are others on deck too. So this is, as I mentioned, a lot of moving parts and a lot to keep up with and a lot of Skyping or Zooming as people do these days. And the data will be publicly available once it's all collected. So we still have a ways to go, but it will eventually become publicly available. And we do have a website now, so you can keep checking back there. So it's called naturalscenesdataset.org. There's not a whole lot on there yet, but there is some stuff. And obviously, there's certain bits of information that will keep off the public website until the data is collected. But there are going to be updates, I think, in the coming months. So you can check back there. And ultimately, time is our enemy right now. So this project, whether or not we're done collecting data, the scanner is being decommissioned in mid-November. So whether or not we're done, we're done. So we're collecting as much data as we can, as quickly as we can, and carefully, of course, before this happens. So rest in peace, 7TPS. We will miss you. And it's been pretty reliable lately, at least for us. So fingers crossed, knock on wood, that continues to be the case. So this is us trying to get to the finish line before it gets decommissioned. And just a side note, you know, when we're done with this project, there will probably be a big gaping hole in our lives where countless hours of scanning used to be. So we've entertained the possibility of doing something similar, but instead of natural images, maybe natural sounds. It's still very much a work in progress, just kind of a discussion, brainstorming at this point. For example, how do you compare natural sounds to natural scenes? What's the equivalent of a natural sound to a natural scene? How long do you have to leave the stimuli up for in order to get like a scene representation? what kind of a task would work. Would a memory task like this work for sounds as well? A lot to consider, a lot to consider. And also the name of the data set is still a work in progress. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you again to our 8 amazing subjects and our wonderful research team that's been working so hard on this project. The 7 TPS for not dying yet, and also the NSF Information and Intelligence Systems grant that is supporting this.